Typically, I try to have the titles of these episodes be fairly specific, or at least hit upon the overarching theme that I felt kind of grew out of the conversation that I wound up having with any given guest. But if you've actually read the title of this week's episode, you're going to see it's a bit of a break from that typical specific title. Because this week, my conversation with Paige Kelly of Zephyr Valley Ceramics twists and turns in a beautiful way, much like her career paths. A self-proclaimed late bloomer, there is this stunning moment in my conversation with Paige at about the 46-minute marker, so you're going to have to stick with us, when she's discussing the narrative body of work that she's currently producing, where I hear literally every experience she has had in the last 2 decades, inside and outside of working in clay, come together to inform this new, fresh work. Work that, as you'll hear, wasn't informed by the ability to sell it or not, but by Paige's fresh perspective on making things that are meaningful to her. Now, as two type A, passionate ladies, when we get to talking about things we are committed to, we get a little riled up. And given we are both grown-ups who recorded this episode in the privacy of our own homes, some adult language slips in. If you're listening in a community setting or with little ones around, this would be the moment where it's up to you to decide if you want to pop on the headphones or not. Don't worry, you don't have to rush. You've got about 30 more seconds until the official start of our conversation, because first we have a brief message from our sponsor.
Hi, I'm Kara, content creator and Facebook wrangler for Amico Brent, bringing you ideas and support for your creative adventures every day. This week's episode is brought to you by Amico Brent. Find your favorite Amico glaze at your local distributor. Happy glazing!
Now on with the show. Welcome to the Maker's Playbook, the show where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, seasoned entrepreneur of now 13 years, Rebecca Ikes Kara.
Welcome to the Type A personality.
That's going to be the title of this episode. Oh, I think that's going to be my intro. I think we should just do a cold open on this episode. We just go straight in. All right, Paige, take it away.
Well, I'm Paige Kelly. I am a ceramic artist and maker, and I really want to emphasize that piece of it as well. In Montana, I live in the surrounding area of Brayland, also known as Helena, the capital city of Montana. I am Gen X. I'm facing my 50th birthday here very soon, which is kind of I'm a late bloomer. I think that that's an important thing to say, because most of the things that I've accomplished in life happened for me after 30. I spent a lot of time wandering around the country, not really having a sense of who I was or what I wanted to do for a lot of time. I left home at the age of 16. I went to the Art Institute in Seattle for a semester or two, and then wandered to North Carolina for a while, and back to Montana, and then to Washington State again for a while. So anyway, I spent a lot of my youth doing that. And then in 2000, my brother was murdered, and I had to come back home to my hometown of Helena, Montana, to support my mother, who was a witness, and it was just a bad situation. Yeah. So I came home and went through a series of just, trying to survive and trying to keep my mother alive. And I made her, I made her move out of the house that we grew up in and move into a different house, because that was the site of my brother's death. And she just couldn't. And understandably so. And so we moved. And so when we moved to a location that caused me to drive past the Archie Bray Foundation at least twice a day, every day.
That is not what I was expecting of how you got to Helena, but keep going.
Yeah. So I actually grew up here in Helena. I am a 5th generation Montanan, But yeah, when you suffer a trauma like that, you start to reevaluate everything. So I actually divorced my second husband at that point, came home, moved my mom, drove past the Bray going, okay, what am I going to do? I'm 20-something, 28, 29 years old at that point. And I thought, I had some experience with clay and I really enjoyed it when I was in grade school and high school. And what the hell, stop in and see what's going on here. So that's essentially what happened. I just wandered in and said, I need something to do. And I kind of remember liking this thing. So I started taking community classes at the Bray.
It's a casual studio to take community classes at. No big deal.
Yeah, no. Yeah. It was, at the time, the director was Josh DeWeese, who is now an instructor at MSU in Bozeman, and one of the kindest, gentlest people I've ever met, and just a great, quiet, but significant guide. And a great resource always. So I started taking community classes at the Bray in the summer of 2003 and stayed doing that for quite a while. I went to, in January of 2004, I started my college career at the local college. It's a private college. It's called Carroll College. It's a private Catholic institution, but the only real alternative for higher education I wanted a bachelor's degree because I thought that was going to open doors for me. But then I also realized I really just wanted an education on the things that I never had learned before. And so I sort of, at the same time I was going to college full time, I was still going to the Bray for the community classes that they had. And I was so lucky. I was there at the most brilliant possible time. My first instructor was Jeremy King, who goes by Junior. Brilliant artist. Well, they all are. I mean, you could not go wrong. My second...
They don't exactly let the average ones teach.
No. Well, and you can't be a resident there without having some ability to teach, really, because that was, at least at the time, that was part of the process of being a resident. You had to teach classes. Ben Krupka was my second instructor. I have learned at the knee of Jennifer Allen, who's a phenomenal artists. God, so many of them. They're just going through my brain. I've been so lucky. I've done workshops there because, lots of former residents come back and do workshops. So Ayumi Horie, I've done a Jeff, who's I think he's the St. Croix. So he's a Minnesota potter. Bruce Cochran. Like I said, I am not formally educated in ceramics, as in I do not have a BFA or an MFA. I do, however, have 2 bachelor's degrees, one a Bachelor of Arts, one a Bachelor of Science, and the minors and double majors and all of that stuff too. All of which I've gotten since I was 30, by the way.
Yep.
So I was really fortunate to be able to learn from these incredibly talented and smart people. And in 2007, decided that I was really tired of the community firing situation because at the time there was a guy that was a community student who put auto glass on the outside of his pots. So here, folks, I'm just going to say, don't do that if you are sharing a kiln with other people because you're going to wreck their work and they're going to get pissed.
Oh.
Which is what happened. And so I left the community situation.
Mm-hmm.
Bought a used kiln from the Bray. They happened to be cycling out a couple of Scott kilns, and I grabbed one. And I bought a Thomas Stewart wheel, and I went into the unfinished basement of my mother's new house that I had just built her, and started throwing pots in 2007, and started Zephyr Valley Ceramics as my ceramics business. I'm a DBA. I'm not.
Yep.
But yeah, so Zephyr Valley was born in 2007.
Oh my gosh. So now just to give the quick trajectory before we start digging into a lot of, I thought I knew what I was going to ask you before we got on this call. And now there's so many places. Okay. So are you still in that same house now, or have you and Mia, who is your daughter, side note, have you guys moved? Tell us just a little bit, because you're still in Helena. So give us a little bit of like studio and life.
Yeah. During that time, I was 2006, I was in my junior year at Carroll. I had done an internship at the local historical society and came home to my then partner and said, oh my God, I can't take how these people treat each other in the office. There's all this inner office stuff that was happening. And I was like, I just can't handle it. And he looked at me and he's like, well, so let's start building houses. He had a real estate background and I had been building stuff. Like, okay, so
that's a normal response.
Right. Let's just start building houses.
With your backgrounds, it does make sense, but I just love that. Yeah, let's just do that. Why not?
I'm a granddaughter of ranchers. I knew how to swing a hammer. I had built, like I said before, I'd moved my mom out to a house past the Bray. Well, at some point when my partner and I got together, he and I then moved into this other house in this other neighborhood. And in the meantime, I had been building stuff for my mother. I built stuff for us. I was like rebuilt. We had this brand new house built and I had to tear down the deck and rebuild it almost immediately because it was a piece of crap. So it just was something that I did. So I was the builder. He was the real estate aspect, did the financial piece of that for us. We started Beargrass Homes in 2006. We did the LLC stuff and got all legit and everything. And then we started building houses in our neighborhood and we built 5 houses there. And in like 2006, might have been early 2007, my mother said, okay, I'm ready for a new place to live. And I said, well, I'm building 2 houses. Come pick one. And so she did. And it was that house that I landed in her basement because she had room. In my house, the house that John and I built together for us was just big enough for just us. Like there was no extra space. So I landed in her basement, but it was in the same neighborhood. So it was like just across the street. So it was really handy. And I joined Etsy early 2008 and started selling my work. And I got a commission almost immediately with the Milwaukee Repertory Theater. The prop master there, the prop master's assistant found me and the prop master contacted me and I built them an entire dinnerware set for an Italian play.
I'm sorry.
And
they need to redo this play now because I know a guy who can make some pots.
Right. It was actually Italian. So that was my first big commission. And it kind of it just started to be. So I graduated in 2007 from Carroll with an honors degree. I wrote an honors thesis about, I'm sorry. The timeline's just so screwed up because everything's linked together in my brain because it's still relevant today. So I did a study abroad program where I went to the National University of Ireland in Galway, and I lived in Galway for 8 weeks while I studied at the university there as part of their Irish Studies program. And I am largely of Irish descent. That's my background. So that was in 2005. And then in 2007, when I was writing my thesis for my degree, I wrote it on warrior women of Ireland. And we could easily turn that into a master's thesis because I was told to cut about 25 pages out of it. I wrote it in 4 days. So just like I say, welcome to the type A. Like it's so, yeah. So my kid was born in 2010 and I was building houses in the summer and doing pots in the winter. And that's kind of, after I graduated, that was kind of how that flow started happening. It wasn't quite as insane as it is even now. But yes, I was building houses and throwing pots, and then I had my kid, and then I literally was on the job site 2 weeks later, I had my kid in the carrier in the front while I was building the house was a custom home. Anyway, doing that. And yeah, I just kept my nose to the grindstone, I just do the next thing that's right in front of me. And so I built 12 houses and we've lived in 3. The house I currently live in, I bought 3.5 years ago with my now former spouse, who lives in another house that we bought that we renovated. We did several projects like what you're doing with your house, right? Where you take a project house and you pour a bunch of TLC into it, and you just, I love doing that. That's one of my favorite things. It's a form of creating for me. So, when you can take something that is either non-existent or something that desperately needs attention and be able to bring and breathe life into it and make it come into being, it's almost like throwing pots for me. Like, it's taking raw material and, I don't want to say perfecting it, because I don't think I believe in perfection per se, but I believe in that creation process. Like, it is.
Right. You've transformed the raw material from one thing into a different purpose.
Exactly. And I guess that's why I like the term maker better even than artist, because for me, it's almost more about the process than it is about the completion, if that makes sense.
You are speaking my love language. Yes.
Right?
I mean, for me, 100% makes sense, because that's the thing that always interests me. Is like, with photography, I had to care about the end product. I do have to care about the end product.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I got into ceramics even before, over a decade ago, 13 years ago, when I was in the UK and actually got introduced to it for the first time, I was kind of on my own to learn it a lot. I had somebody who showed me, and then she discovered she was pregnant and she was leaving the job. And so then it was kind of like, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to figure this out. And so I would spend hours at the wheel not knowing what the hell I was doing, but it just felt good. I didn't need to come up with an end product. I came home with some ceramics, but not nearly as much as you would expect for a year.
Right.
It was in a book bag on my back.
Oh, nice.
I threw out my shoulder in the process.
Well, I'm sure you did.
Well, because the bases of those things are about an inch thick. Like, nothing was well done. But anyway. Well, but yeah, it is such a tactile.
It is.
That tactile experience is the enjoyment of doing it rather than the end result necessarily. Absolutely.
Right. And for me also, there's just something about the material itself, whether that material, is clay, or if that material is wood or tile or fabric or, yarn, whatever that material is, there's something about digging into what it is and what its parameters are, and then building on that into making it be something else and something beautiful. I want, my big goal for the homes that I built was I wanted people to walk in and feel like they were at home. Like, I wanted the house to embrace them. And I feel in a lot of ways the same way about my ceramic work. I want people to connect with it on a visceral level. I don't really care if it's the most colorful or the shiniest, right? That doesn't matter to me as much as, do they connect viscerally? Does their gut go, yes? Yeah. I want that experience myself, I guess. So I want to create that for others.
Absolutely. Oh, man. Here I thought I was going to just talk to you about the pragmatic side of being, we've talked a little bit in the community about you're in this place that is a hotbed of ceramicists and pottery and art,
Absolutely.
But you're not directly connected to that group.
Right.
And you're also making all of this work as a single mom. And
Yes.
there was a lot of,
we can talk
we're
about
still going to talk about that stuff, but
yeah. Well, and I can touch on that a little bit in that, I do call this Brayland, and I know that kind of tickles you a little bit, but
it makes sense too.
It really does. This community is small. Okay. I think in the city proper, it's maybe 30 or 32,000 people, but The Archie Bray Foundation is on the outside edge on the west side of town. Their residency program brings people in for a summer. They bring them in for a year, 2 years, and they're not making money, right? Like, these folks have to find a place to live. They have to get a second job because their stipend is not huge. I mean, it's,
Right.
They get breaks on firing fees and materials, but they still have to pay for it ultimately, right? It's not like it's all just handed to them on a platter. So they become immersed in the community, and the community is invested in them because everybody loves that the Bray is such a, in some ways a mecca of art, so that, it's the capital of the state. So there's some folks here who are fairly well off, who are great supporters of the arts, and not just ceramics. I mean, we have a community theater here called Grand Street Theater that is an incredible place with community theater. They have an after-school program. They have a summer program for kids. It's the Grand Street Theater School. My kid's a part of it, so of course I really support them too. But there's just a great appreciation for what the Bray brings to this community, and the community gives back to the Bray. And so that it becomes this sort of symbiotic relationship. And as residents have the opportunity to see the space and see all of the outdoor opportunities, there's every mountain in the world to hike here. There's waters to raft. There's fishing to be had. There's all of those opportunities as well. So they get hooked in because they just love the place, right? So we ended up having several residents just stay here or go and come back. So I've been really fortunate to build friendships and relationships with several of those folks, and I'm really grateful for that. And we have another thing that's called the Montana Clay Tour that happens in July, and the Montana Clay Group, which is a separate association, but because Montana's a big state with very few people, so we're all Montana Clay related somehow, right? So even if we're not formally of the Bray, by the Bray, or Red Lodge Clay Center, or in Missoula, they have the Clay Studio. Kalispell area has their independent studios up there. We all try to get together because we're so far apart. We try to get together once a year just to get together and network and spend some social time, but we also separately have the Montana Clay Tour, which is mostly organized at this point by former residents of the Bray. There's other folks that have been involved off and on, non-resident folks, that there's several places around the Helena area that host a group. It's very similar to the St. Croix Pottery Tour, or the one that, the Michiana one. Yeah. And I think Michael Klein has one he does in his area.
There's a Asparagus Valley.
Yeah. Yep. So it's similar to that. It's a 2-day event. People come out and go to these 6 or 7 spots around the area and see everybody's pots, and it's all really great fun. It's always also the hottest freaking weekend of the year. So
always.
It's a great time, and so there are those opportunities to interact with each other. So as someone who is not a former resident, but is a former student, community student, I still get to have these opportunities to interact with these folks that have those, pedigrees, for lack of a better term, right? Like, they've been anointed by Alfred.
Right. Which, like, right? We laugh about it, but can feel a certain way. Mm-hmm. I think there is that same kind of, for lack of a better word, hierarchy.
Yes.
For sure in the photography and the weddings industry, in terms of, people being featured or published in certain magazines or on certain lists of, oh gosh, I can't tell you how many lists there are of top 20 photographers in Chicago, or top photographers in the country according to Vogue, or, all of these different things that can feel important if you let them, but also maybe don't matter as much as it's made out to be, because some of it's also just marketing.
Right. Well, and having been an academic, I've got a Bachelor of Arts in History with a minor in Classical Studies. I wrote my thesis, my honors thesis on warrior women of Ireland. Then in my 40s, I decided to go back to school again and actually get a more marketable degree for a job, because I needed to get a job that I could pay for my student loans for my first degree.
Because getting more student loans is a great option.
Yeah. So I now have also a Bachelor of Science in Information Technology Management and Web Development and Design. And I did that full-time. I did that in 3 years full-time while working full-time and being the mom of a kid in theater and dance. And I know you're shaking your head.
And people think I'm busy. This is why I needed you to come on the podcast, because people think I'm crazy.
Yeah.
And I knew. I was like, I have a dog.
Oh, I have two. I have 2 of those and 4 cats. Yep. And a kid who's almost 13 who's in theater and is actually opening Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer tonight. So that's going to be fun.
All right. We got to keep track of our time then.
Right. Oh, we got a bit. And then, so there's a lot of time that I spent in the car. And there's still a lot of time I spend in the car. One of the reasons that we moved to this house is it's only 10 minutes to anywhere, as opposed to our former house, which was 20 or 25. And in the winter, when the blizzards are doing their thing and the roads are icy, it was really awful, and I hated it. So now being closer to town eases that burden a bit. But I spent most of my time getting my second degrees in the car, in the parking lot across from the theater, because that's where my kid was at, right? Or in the car outside of the dance studio. Yep. And so that's how I did that, hotspotting my phone and being on my laptop, because you do what you have to. And
we were saying, I kickstarted all of this by saying, you were saying as a former academic, in terms of that relationship with the hierarchy of
I got distracted.
Whatever we want to call it. Yep. But
I got distracted. Yes. So as a former academic and one that has written papers and presented papers and done all of the things, right, I know that there is a certain amount of navel gazing that occurs that is encouraged in that environment. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm saying that when you are then communicating with members of the public, that elitism is hard to shed from your language and the way you interact with people. And so I think that I in no way want to demean the work that people do when they go get their BFAs and their MFAs, because I know it's a ton of work. But I also know that there are a ton of incredibly talented people in the world who haven't had those opportunities, that are putting in as much introspection to their work now as an independent artist, craftsperson, maker, to put something out that's quality, that speaks to their voice, that resonates with them on a soul level, but also something that they can go out and present to the world and sell, so that they can make something that resembles a living in our country, which is, I know that you and I could go on and on and on and on and on about healthcare, because the number one reason that I am not a full-time 70-hour-a-week artist/maker is because I need healthcare. I've got a kid, so I have a day gig. And I work 40 hours a week every stinking week. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that makes it way more sense to me now, because I was like, how the heck? I mean, it would be amazing. I want to find the person who's a single parent with children who I don't know how, that was a redundant statement. I don't know how you could be a single parent without a child.
I don't know. Sometimes you wonder with all the cats and the dogs and stuff.
Well, I truly though, part of my interest was like, how the heck I'm good at marketing. I'm good at selling things. And nonetheless, it's still like, how in the world do you make the ends meet when the demands are what they are in terms of the cost? Even for those of us living relatively simple lives, the cost of living is just,
it's awful.
There's only so much you can do.
That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
And that's how. So I have a day job. I work in IT. In my day job, I tell people I'm the wizard behind the curtain. So
You're the person I wish I had. This is the thing nobody thinks about when you're going to go into business, is like, you don't have all those other departments that you get to farm out the solutions to.
Right.
The thing about, from the academic side and kind of that, the accidental elitism, if you want to call it that, in
Sure.
terms of having been so introspective for so long, is I think also the other side of it is accidentally assuming that when we get those markers of accomplishments, the degrees, the recognition, the being on the list of whatever, featured whatever, for photography, getting published, stuff like that. I think when we focus on those and then start to tick them off the list, the assumption is that the other problems will be solved in terms of like, people will automatically buy your work. People will automatically hire you because, well, hey, look, here, I did the thing. Like,
Right.
I have this. So now shouldn't everybody kind of, if you will, want me, want
Right.
my work, want what I do because I did the thing? And the difficult thing is that doesn't always solve the problem.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure with something like the Bray, being geographically in that space, there's a certain amount of eyeballs that then see your work because it's a known entity, obviously. But you still have to learn how to communicate
Yes.
your vision, your
Yes.
goal, all of these things. I'm going to stop rambling and let you take it.
No, I think that's absolutely true. I think there's and not just the degrees you can get in the arts, right? There's a certain level of authority, I think, that we as a country, because I can't really speak to outside of the States, but the authority or the level of expertise that we automatically assign to people who have degrees. On my first day at this job that I'm currently in, I was introduced to all of the managers and the supervisors, and I am a bit of an overachiever. And I know, right? So
Step is recognition.
thanks. Good. Yeah. So when my the administrator of the division that I work in, says to me, C's get degrees, I about freaking fell over. I mean, I just you have no idea how hard I worked for my 3.891. Thank you very much. I mean, wow.
And just to put that into context for anybody who doesn't work on the grading score of the US, a 4.0 is perfect. So I just need we weren't talking about a 3.8 on a scale of 10 or 5, that's out of 4, just so everybody knows.
Right? So we're so weird when it comes to education and acceptance and authority and all of those things. We've got and Montana's really weird because we require degrees for any job that pays any sort of living wage. You have to have a freaking degree.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be in debt up to your fucking eyeballs, but you're going to have that degree. Yeah. But then there's sort of this casual sort of I don't know, poking, razzing, shit giving that is yeah, you've got your degree, but you don't, it's one or the other. It's you don't know shit because you haven't had any experience. And I've been out here on the road doing this for 20 goddamn years, and you're gonna, you're not better than me. And then there's the whole oh, you have a degree, so you must know everything. We just don't have that balance, I think, that is so necessary in so many ways. But with regard to, Brayland and all of that, those folks, there's no question that they are, every single one of them that I have ever met has been a kind, generous person who, their degrees don't matter. They really are just human beings who are just trying to do what drives them. And also try to make a living at it. And you're right, it's absolutely freaking impossible. Was it Matt Katz that said, he doesn't know any potters or anybody who immediately makes a living from this? It takes forever to get there. I'm just now feeling like I'm getting a foothold in the community as far as being recognized on being, the same playing field. Of course, I've been doing this since 2003. So I am finally feeling like my skill level is like, I can throw. I mean, I can freaking throw. But
Which is like, I just want to reiterate that because we're talking 19 years of working at this craft. And because so much of what's online is so quick to, and look, I understand it because I was doing it. I, learned at a community studio, loved it, was so excited about it. Also had past clients of mine who were like, "Ooh, can you make me bowls? Can you make me this?" And so then you get caught up in the dopamine kick of the sale, right? And that's exciting and that's gratifying.
right.
And so well before you've ever really gotten to a point that you should be selling anything, just as far as respecting the craft goes, and I feel like I can say that because I did it unintentionally.
Me too.
As
Absolutely.
most people don't do it out of malice, obviously. We just do it out of excitement.
Mhm.
And it is such a craft that, unlike any other craft that I've ever done or have learned about, that is so complex on so many layers to try to learn. And then also, if you choose, has a functionality piece to it.
Right. Right.
So like,
Right.
you can be a great thrower, but if you don't give any thought to design
Right.
in terms of the use of it, well, if the teapot drips all over the table,
Right.
maybe people don't want to use it.
Right.
Doesn't matter if you're making art with a capital A, but
Well, and there's that finding your voice piece of it too. There was, and I don't know, I'm sorry, my memory mashes things together these days. So I don't remember if it was something I heard on your podcast or if it was another one, but there's something about finding your voice, but your voice is whatever it is you are immediately attempting to say. It doesn't have to be this like big overarching specific theme. Now, when you see my work, I definitely have developed a narrative, but I'm going to use Dita Mert as an example. She does these beautifully bright colored pots. They're mostly hand built. And there was a period of time where she was doing mostly the same decoration, which became her voice, right? And I'm using the quotation marks. And you could spot a Dita Mert pot from across the room. But now she's allowed herself the opportunity to play with color and shapes and how she designs and decorates her pots. And she's got a much wider range now that I wouldn't necessarily say, I know that's a Dita Mert pot. I still think it's a lovely pot, but I don't necessarily see it right across the way. But she is exploring now. She's exploring color. She's exploring texture and shape and form. And that in itself is a voice, right? That joy of expression is a voice that isn't as restrictive as what she was doing before, right? Like she had a very specific set of things that she was doing, and that was her box and her voice. And I just really feel like anything that you are presenting out to the world is your voice. It doesn't have to look like a cookie cutter stamp of the thing that you did last week or the week before or 3 months ago. Like,
this is true even for artists that are, in the canon, if you will, that are famous and will be famous forever. Because if I say the name Picasso,
right,
people are going to have a specific style in their head
right,
that has kind of been chosen as what he's known for. But Picasso also did ceramics.
yes,
Most people don't think about it.
right,
Picasso also has a deep, and going back to our earlier conversation around that appreciation of craft and making, like you can see his really, really early works, which were very traditional and have a massive depth of skill in them. Like he didn't drop upon the scene putting noses where eyeballs go.
right. No, that was
he didn't
definitely
start there.
progress or
Right.
not, depending on your opinion of Picasso.
Well, and like that, then that's a portion of his work, and that's what he's known for now. Right. So, like, if in 50 years, Dita's like what they might, who knows, the world, if you will, I don't know what to call it, Like people
Mhm.
will choose a portion, and then that's kind of what someone's known for, whether or not that's entirely all of the work they've ever made before.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
Like your neighbor, for example, Adam Field, has like his ongies don't look anything like the carved porcelain work that he does.
No, they look nothing alike. And his precision with his porcelain also includes laser levels, by the way. So I'm definitely not the only type A out here, but yeah.
He keeps his hidden under the beanie.
He does.
Nobody knows. His type A is hidden like a little. I just pictured the scene in Harry Potter when Voldemort's like underneath on the guy's head.
Oh, yes. Yes, under the hat. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I visited with
Sorry, Adam. We love you. We say that with love.
Yeah. Well, and I have to tell you, Adam's a great example of the approachability and the kindness and the generosity that these incredibly talented people that have the opportunity to come to the Bray, you know, they have to go through an application process. They have to be reviewed, and then they're chosen by the board. And Adam had that opportunity and came here with his family, as you know, and I heard the podcast that you guys did, and I happened to run into him, and I had to tell him I was really surprised to hear about how his work, you know, he struggles sort of with that too. You know, it's what is my voice? What is my intent? Do I attempt to make a pot to sell? And these are my words put on top of his words. So, you know, obviously, if you haven't heard the podcast, you got to go listen to it. But
I'll link it.
Yeah, please do, because it's one of my favorites. You know, he actually told me to go listen to a David Chang podcast for this other artist that did, you know, food, just for the sake of having this experience. And that's what the art's about, right? Like it's about the experience. Now, I express that in a different way, but I 1,000% agree. Absolutely about the experience. And so, yeah, Adams is not only just a spectacular potter, but is also a very kind and generous and a great example of the kinds of people that the Archie Bray Foundation has brought into this area. So, yeah, we're so lucky. And you know, it's hard to get past that sense of imposter syndrome that as a person who is not formally trained, you know, I don't have a piece of paper that says that I am really good at throwing or that I have a voice or, you know, but I've been really lucky to experience that education through others and their interpretation of what they learned. And then also be given the opportunity. And it's hard to get over the imposter syndrome because you're just like, well, I just don't know. And, you know, I think that not everybody does. And I think that's okay. I think that that's part of learning and growing and doing.
I also don't know that it's ever something we check off a list.
No.
Right? I imagine if any of us get to the point where we go, all right, check done, we've probably stopped working in that medium and we're on to something else.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to put this one away because I've done everything I want to do in it.
Right. I can see myself approaching that with photography. Mm-hmm. Like I can walk, which in a way is great when it comes to the commercial work, when it comes to the event work, because I don't get nervous anymore. I don't walk into a room going, oh my gosh, how am I going to deal with this? I'm kind of like, all right, cool, boom, boom, boom. Here's what we're going to do. No big deal, whatever.
Right.
But at the same time, that also has brought with it a little less curiosity, if I'm being honest. You know, I can get a little bit more curious now in the way that I teach because I have to think back to what's the underlying situation going on here? How can I break this down? And how can I find a solution that doesn't involve a $6,000 camera?
Right.
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 And so that's curious. That's learning more about the craft in a, you know, breaking down the actual variables happening as opposed to like, well, I'm going to buy this gear and that solves the problem kind of thing.
Right.
It doesn't exactly work that way, people. No. The gear doesn't solve the problem, but you get my point.
Yeah, you still have to understand the light. That's just especially with photography, that's always the most critical piece. I think the camera itself doesn't matter. I mean, I say that to you, the photographer, but I have a Canon SLR. It was one of the very first ones that came out back in the, early aughts or mid aughts. And I haven't picked it up to actually take a picture of one of my pots in probably 3 years. Yep. And it's just part of it's the convenience of the computer in my pocket.
Yep.
It's
why would you? Why would you?
Right. So yes. Well, I want to come back to that curiosity piece. I think that's incredibly critical to the creative process. And I think that I want to try very hard to continue to stay curious about what can happen if I do this next thing, whatever that next thing is. I am currently doing a pretty narrative group of work, which is new to me. I did not previously do narrative style work because I was trying to sell pots, and I was trying very hard to launch as a studio potter full-time all the time, making a living doing that. So I was being influenced by outside influences, which I think is for me. I can only speak for me in this case, right? For me, those outside influences were too strong, or I allowed them to be too strong. I let them sway what my work was going to look like because I thought that if I could appease the many, I could make enough pots to sell to make a living, and that I desperately wanted to do that as a studio potter. I now feel that I am actually going in the direction that I was always intended to go. And I'm starting to discuss the things that are important to me in my work, and I'm not listening to those influences anymore. But I am in an incredibly privileged position where I work a 40-hour-a-week job that allows me to pay my dang bills. And I have health insurance through my gig, right? My day gig takes care of that. I don't love my day gig, but I don't hate my day gig. But it pays the bills and allows me to express in my ceramic work my deep concern about climate change, right? So this is the completely different. It looks totally different. It's dark. My former work was white. It's now shades of brown and black and gray. And I am also really struck by some of the things I see on Instagram there's an Instagram profile called Saint Severus, and I'm not going to try and pronounce the photographer's actual name because I'm going to slaughter it. But that particular photographer takes images of abandoned homes. He spent some time in Europe and took images of abandoned chateaus and castles in France. And you see personal items left in place. It looks like the people got up and walked out and left everything behind. And the wallpaper is peeling, and the paint is peeling, and the stuffed animals are molding, and, you see various levels of decay that are occurring in these homes. And I keep thinking about I have two themes, but they're kind of wrapped up in each other. So how does climate change itself affect our planet? And how would it affect if I took one of my fancy pots and stuck it out in the forest behind my house and left it there? What would it look like in 300 years, right? So nature's going to take her space back. And what does that look like? So that's kind of that theme. And then there's also that with climate change, with political unrest, with all of the things that are happening in the world, war, people are forced from their homes, and those homes may or may not ever be occupied again, right? And the impact that we have left on the climate, but then there's also these formal structures, and what did those look like over time? And so I really love the aesthetic of the paint so here's my inner historian, right? You see all of the layers that those people put onto those walls over time, right? As that plaster starts to peel. You can see the pinks and the greens and the blues and the whatevers in their layers, and it tells a story. And that's really what history is to me. the wallpapers. There was a home here in town that I desperately wanted to save that had like 5 different layers of wallpaper that was like coming peeling out like onions. And I was like, oh my God, it's the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, right? But they were the most glorious brocade and toile and like all of this. You could see the trend of the season on the walls. And it was just, there's so much gorgeousness and history and story. And like those walls, you know, there was a TV show if these walls could talk, right? Like seriously, they talk. You just have to listen.
I knew you were going to say it was gorgeous. And the whole time I was thinking about the epic number of layers I had to take off the lovely woodwork in our home and how many days it took me just to strip the wood back to its original level.
Yes.
Because there are some layers that are not gorgeous.
No. No, you know, there's this lime green that I've seen some houses in the 70s that they lived through the 70s that is like, oh.
I can show it to you. It's under the paint.
Seriously? Yes.
It's under this.
Right?
But this is the point, though, that we talked about at first when you were explaining kind of your history and the windy road that has brought you to this point is as you were describing all of this, I was like, this is where everything comes together. Not only your traditional studies, but also your other business that you did before. You're talking with so much passion about houses.
Oh, I love houses.
And how that affects your ceramics now. Like every experience has layered onto itself the art that you are now making, which I think gets lost. It's easy for a lot of people to hear this about you and be like, well, yeah, look at the work Paige makes. That's not me. My IT job or web development job or whatever doesn't apply in any way. It's taking away from my time. It's not helping me pursue, whatever. Right. When really, I think for everyone across the board, regardless of your life experiences, it does all meld together. Because if the whole point of art is to be some kind of unique, different, something that stands out from the crowd that is uniquely you and no one else, well, the combination of your life experiences is the thing. Like that's the thing that's different for everybody.
Yep. And then to top it all off, the piece that I used to do that I think I'm fairly well known for because I was invited to some shows. There is a dandelion puff. I call it the wish puff, right? So my kid, when they were 4, came in, Mama, I brought you a flower, right? And it's this most perfect, beautiful wish puff that you've ever seen. And I yelled at my former spouse and said, grab the camera. And I held it as still as I could hold it on. I was blank a background wall as I could because I knew I just wanted the puff. And we digitized it and I turned it into decals and I put it on lots of pots. And it was very popular. People loved it. And then I had to not do that work anymore. And I felt really sad because I loved that. I loved that connection of my art with my life and the thing that I love more than anything, which is my kid, right? So there was like this through line. So earlier this year, I started getting some artwork done on my body. And I have that tattooed on my forearm in a way of taking it back because that narrative is mine, right? And then it dawned on me, I can still use this thing. And so I redid it. I took the original image and I reworked it in Adobe so that I could print it on my Cricut as a stencil. And it is going to start as of tomorrow, actually. It's going to start being seen again in my work, in my way, in my voice. And having reclaimed that feels like a fucking accomplishment beyond all accomplishments, right? Like it is like the gold medal. I did it. It is mine and nobody can fucking take it away from me. It's mine. So I am so excited about that. And I'm so excited that I'm going to be able to use it in a way that it reflects what I'm currently working out right? Like in some ways, this work is me trying to figure out in my brain, how do I justify living in a world that we live in? Like, how do I just, my impact on the planet as a human being, knowing that we impact the planet? How do I justify my place as a female in America today? How do I justify having a kid who identifies on the LGBTQ in that community? Yeah, I like to say on the rainbow because there's lots of rainbows in my house. My kid's gifted and ADHD. And so that comes with a whole nother set of things, right? Healthcare, again, just jumps to the top of that list. So my exploration with these things in my ceramic work and our impact, this is the way I'm doing therapy because I want to scream most of the time. I'm either sobbing in the middle of the night or I'm, screaming in my head because I can't understand how our country has gotten to this point. Like academically, yes, right? Like I get the one, this thing led to this thing, this
one plus
right.
one plus one.
Like I get that, but at some point I keep thinking that as human beings, we have to wake the fuck up. And remember that we don't exist in a vacuum. We impact each other, whether we want to or not. We are a community organism. And I just can't wrap my brain around the people who say, I've got mine, fuck you. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I'm working all that stuff out in my work, in my ceramics. Like it's all like blah.
It's a pretty blah, though.
Yeah.
It's a very well thought out and a good form blah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I hope so. I'm really enjoying my nod to Greek ceramics, ancient Greek ceramics. The inspiration came from Tom Turner, who is a potter I don't believe he's doing work anymore, but he has an amazing collection. And if you don't follow him on Facebook, or I think he's on Instagram, but Tom Turner's just a brilliant ceramic artist and collector. And there was a picture that he posted that just blew my mind. I was like, I've got to figure out how to do that. And so that is a major part of my new work are these dinos and homos. They're, the stacked pieces that I throw in parts and then assemble. And then there's the large jar that goes on the top. And they can be used for whatever. They can be decorative. They can be used for storing food or water. That's what they used them for in ancient Greece. You could put flowers in it. I don't fucking care. But it just it makes a statement, I think. And I really love those pieces and always wanted to do that more elegant, more formal, more classic form. But then I really also always wanted to interpret what I think our impact on our environment looks like. And I'm really excited to be doing that work now.
That's awesome. I have to ask you a question before I let you go.
Yeah.
That's going to be a full right turn, sort of, kind of. And it's going to sound like a promotion, but it's not, because I genuinely am just blatantly curious. Because you are in our community,
yes,
which is amazing.
Yes.
It's awesome. And what's interesting to me is the way my assumption was in part that an online space, a home for makers, was a way to also provide a resource to people who don't have access to community in person the way that you do.
Right.
One, because obviously the arts are not an equitable place, and that's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
That we need another hour for.
Maybe two.
Yeah, maybe two. And a drink. But, so it's really interesting to me, and I just feel super honored that you have access to some of the greatest resources in the country, but you're still in there. And I'm like, why the hell are you?
Oh, that's funny. I know a lot about a lot, but I don't know everything about everything, right? And I also know that I would not be where I am at the ripe old age of damn near 50 if people hadn't helped me, if they hadn't shared their time, even if it was just to listen to me go on and on and on as I do, right? Or say, hey, I've heard vinegar works really well as a supplement to slip. It's the small things. If we do not share those small things with each other, we're lesser for it. And I think that the thing about the community, well, there's a couple of things. Number one, I have been listening to you since the beginning of this. So I am a big fan. I think you're lovely. I wanted to be a part of what you were doing. I also really think that in general, we are missing community. Like, that's just something that I personally crave. I think that having not had community during the pandemic affected all of us. I think being isolated affected all of us. And I think I just don't feel like I own anything. Like, what I have will come through me. I'm just a keeper for the moment. I can't wait to hand it off to the next person. So and one of the things that you said, and one of the things that caught me was that you wanted to create a space that would catch people and provide people the kind of community that you initially felt you had as a photographer. And I totally got that. Like, that just resonated with me because, I had that at the Bray. I had that kind of community. We could go into the pottery and get eaten by mosquitoes and throw pots for as long as we wanted to. Like, there's a marsh next door, and there's the Spring Meadow Lake, which is a man-made facility that's like right there, and the mosquitoes are just killer in the summer. They're just killer. But that has always just rung for me. Anytime that there's an opportunity that I can participate, and it's not even like, honestly, I don't feel like I'm giving that much. I feel like I'm getting as much or more. Right.
I call bullshit on that, but thank you.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Bill, our live guy, he's the
OG hype man. He is the OG hype guy.
He's the best. And, everybody else that's been in there have brought their perspectives. I'm so glad we have a basket weaver. Actually, she does more than baskets. She's, does all the chairs and all kinds of things, and
fabric arts. Yep.
Yeah. So
it's a different person.
But we don't have somebody that represents every type of art out there, but we are able to cross-pollinate. And I think that's also very cool, right?
Yep.
So,
I mean, that was thank you, first off. Yeah. But that was the thing. I realized I only had the support that I did because I was able to get myself to these in-person conferences.
Right.
And then those relationships continued virtually after that. But it's a lot. It's a lot to get to an in-person conference, even when the conference itself is reasonably affordable. Like when I look at the cost of NCCA, for example, it's like, yeah, okay, that price is incredibly affordable for the value that comes with the amount of days, the amount of content, et cetera, et cetera. But even then, this example is top of mind because it's in Cincinnati next year. We can drive to Cincinnati, so we don't even have to buy a plane ticket.
Oh, it's so cool.
So we're going to go for the first time. So because we can drive, but then even still, you're looking at gas, you're looking at hotel, you're looking at food, you're looking at, and it gets expensive really quickly, even when the conference itself is conscientious and affordable in the first place.
Right.
So.
Right. And I still haven't made it to an NCCA, and I'm not going to make it next year either. I've got to go to Sacramento with my kid who's competing in a theater thing. So.
Which is ironic since it was in Sacramento last year.
Right. I know. It was like we got
to get her lined up on, the right theater circuit to line up with the NCCA circuit.
I think they were in the same spaces, so they wouldn't have lined up anyway. But yeah, that was like that festival happens in Sacramento, like the third week of February every year, and NCECA is the second or third week of March every year.
Yep.
And
Yep.
yeah, someday I'm going to make it, I swear. I haven't figured out how to rub enough pennies together yet to quite cover all of that. But
Well, maybe it'll come back to Milwaukee, and then you can just crash with Hendrix
there
in our
you
spare
go.
room.
I love it. Let's do it.
I like that plan.
I do too.
Oh man, if it comes back to Milwaukee, this is gonna be intense. We'll move some furniture. People can put some air mattresses down. Francesco might go stay somewhere else so his introverted self can survive.
Right. Oh yeah. I feel bad. I feel bad for him. I honestly, my former spouse was incredibly introverted as well. And it's hard for them to be around people who are super extroverted and will talk to pretty much anybody.
Oopsie.
I didn't mean to call you out, but birds of a feather and all.
I do literally now talk to people for hours.
Yes.
As part of my living.
Which is awesome. How cool is that?
It's great.
Yeah.
Use your skills, people.
Exactly
Use your
right.
skills.
Yep, exactly.
Oh my gosh. Paige, we could keep doing this for hours.
Yes.
And I promised I would clean the house today.
Oh no.
And I am
No,
committed.
you don't want to do that. Why would you want to do that?
I don't want to, but he is making 190. He's pulling 190 handles, and I really don't want to do that actually. So I'm going to dust because he's going to pull handles.
Okay, that does seem fair. Yeah, I have to agree. That does seem
It's
fair.
a pretty solid
Yeah.
trade-off.
Yeah. Yeah,
On a deadline, not even like just that's the goal. It's more that's the number on a deadline. So,
Yeah. No, I don't love pulling handles. In fact, I try to avoid handles at all costs. Which is hilarious.
by the end of this Christmas, we may never offer a mug ever again.
Seriously. I totally understand.
Welcome to the real life. This is the golden ticket, everybody. This is how you do make a living
Yes.
from the things you make.
Yeah.
You pull handles
All
until you want to.
Yes, all the handles.
Scream.
All of them. Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah,
Love
you'll
it.
be hard pressed to find a handle. I did actually do a round of 12 mugs not this time, but the time previous that I did some work, and I decided to play with hand building them as opposed to pulling them, and I enjoyed that process quite a lot more than pulling them. So you might see more handles from me, but really not so much. It's just not.
You want me to cut that part from the interview so it's never heard out loud?
Yeah, maybe.
But Paige, you said I heard
Right?
it.
Yeah. So that's pretty hysterical.
So before we totally lose our minds, the thing that amazes me now, I had no idea you had a J job because everything I see from you in the community and on all of the interwebs seems very full-time. So I have no idea when you're sleeping because you are also on this like committed TikTok
Oh,
plan.
yeah.
I don't know what else to call
Yes.
it. So I was going to ask you where on the internet you want to send people to see all of this work that you're doing, around speaking out about climate change and your voice and all of this stuff. And I'm assuming it's TikTok.
it is. And I am present on all three of the major socials, right? So I have a Facebook business page as well as a Facebook general page. Anything at Zephyr Valley or Zephyr.Valley, kind of depending on the platform, will find me. TikTok is Zephyr_Valley_ceramics. Yeah. So there's a band out there, I think, that calls themselves Zephyr Valley. So trying to distinguish myself. There's a whole story behind the name of the business, but yes, TikTok, I'm at Zephyr Valley Ceramics with the underscores between the words. On Instagram, I'm just at Zephyr Valley, all one word. And I think I'm both Zephyr Valley Pottery and Zephyr Valley Ceramics on Facebook because I wanted to have two pages. One was supposed to be personal and the other was supposed to be business, but then politics happened and friendships happened and it's all just one big thing. So
Yeah. And also the internet is, once you put something out on the internet, it's out there. And so
that's right.
I never pretend that there's there is no personal side.
no.
It's just all.
Yep, exactly. And I have to say that TikTok has turned into kind of an interesting place to be. Really didn't think much of it initially. My kid got on it and kind of convinced me that I should at least participate in some of the transitions, because transitions were really big this last summer. And I know that they're kind of big, but I didn't really know until this last summer. And I just got on TikTok like 2 or 3 months ago, and I'm working on building up my followers so that I can go live. And the community there is real. Like it is warm and friendly. Like, you have to, the algorithm, let me just say this, the algorithm works. It works very well. It is going to give back to you what you put into it. So every like, every follow, all of those things, it's going to pay attention to what you're doing, and it's going to feed that back to you, so that if you go off course a little bit, like, because every once in a while my kid grabs my phone and then suddenly I have a bunch of cosplayers in my feed, and I love cosplayers because they're gorgeous and they're amazing, but that's not necessarily connected to what I like want to look at when I look at TikTok. Like, I'm all into the Gen X stuff right now. Like, Gen X is making their voices known on TikTok, which is awesome, because, we're the overlooked generation. We're the slackers, right?
Oh, Lord.
Oh, sorry.
We need a different episode if we're going to dig through generational stereotypes as an elder millennial.
Right. Oh, no, I got it. I understand. You're a zennial.
Yes.
Oh, right. See?
Whatever.
So
Whatever.
The other thing about TikTok that I think is really interesting is that there are a lot of women my age that are discussing things that happened to us as children. And that has given me a sense of community. I am so stereotypically a Gen X kid. I was a latchkey kid at the age of 6. I started caretaking my brother at the age of 10, who was 6 years younger than I was. Like, all of those things, right? Cooking the meals and making sure, like, all of that stuff. And not having a lot of parental supervision. I'm a kid of a single mom, and so mom was at work. So anyway, I could go on and on about TikTok, because I think I think that it has a place that can be very supportive, and it can in and of itself have a sense of community. And as I might have mentioned, I kind of dig community.
Amazing. All right. You've got me recommitted. I did start an account.
Yes.
And I posted a video, I think.
Well,
all right.
Okay. So what you need to do, at least for the next little while, is post frequently. And you can cross-post between Instagram and TikTok.
Oh, that's completely the plan. Let's be honest.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I go both ways. I go, I'll start something in Instagram. I know. I start something in Instagram and I'll go over to TikTok, or the other way around. I love TikTok's video editor.
The interface is so much better.
It's so good. So I frequently will start in TikTok and end up in Instagram, but I don't love that TikTok has their little branding on all those videos, so I don't do that all the time.
Can't you... All right, we're going down a whole rabbit hole. I think we're going to have a whole TikTok discussion on a separate episode, maybe with a couple other people. We'll figure out who's doing the thing on there and do a panel.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think we should totally do that. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes,
I'll link all of the things so people can just come click on over and
I have a link tree in all the things, so I have, if you land on one, you'll be able to collect to the next.
Okay, so I basically had to force us to stop. I feel like this episode was genuinely an audio version of how conversations grow and continue inside of our community, without intending it to be. I just really wanted to learn how Paige was managing all of the things she's managing to do. But really, one conversation does clearly lead to the next, and all of this stuff is so intertwined. And what I love about our community space is you can actually have nuanced conversations like this on the internet. We have a space to recognize that when someone asks something like, "What's the best way to post on TikTok?" we all stop and say, "Hold on a second. What are your goals? What are you trying to do? Do you want to be a maker full-time and you think you're going to be able to sell more work through TikTok or grow your audience and monetize social media? Or are you side hustling and this just feels like something you're supposed to do or you have to do? Do you want to or do you need to keep that day job? What's a reasonable amount of time you can actually commit to a new social media platform? Etc., etc., etc. All the questions that frankly never get asked when a question like that pops up on somebody's comments of a recent reel or a TikTok post. At the end of the day, as you've experienced in learning a bit about Paige's journey these last couple of decades, so much of life is interconnected, and it all should impact the business decisions we are making. Whether that business is just getting started and you're not yet calling it a business, whether you're side hustling or whether it's full-time. To try and crowdsource answers online without context and understanding of who you are and where you want to go, well, it just misses out on necessary information to actually make smart, informed decisions for yourself. And honestly, for me, more often than not, you wind up just feeling overwhelmed and guilty and like there's so many more things you should be doing or have to be doing, when maybe that's not true. But anyway, I'm rambling and opening up a whole nother can of worms to discuss. So long story short, nuanced, in-depth conversations that actually help us move forward towards our dreams is why the community exists. And you can learn more about all of the nuts and bolts of all of it by visiting makersplaybook.com/community. I kind of hesitated to share that link again here this week because there is so much I want to update about the community on that website page. We are adding all sorts of new things this year thanks to the suggestions of our very community members. Things like virtual studio tours from our members and hopefully very soon critiques with well-known makers in the industry for those that are interested in pushing their work and their style forward. But I haven't had a chance to update any of that on that website page yet because before all of that, I'm hosting another cohort of the Makers Photography Styling System. This is our 6-week course, and alongside of that, I'm also hosting our super popular free live webinar about the 4 most common Instagram photography mistakes and, of course, how to actually avoid them, even if you're only using your cell phone. And all of that is happening in 2 weeks. January 26th and 27th. You can sign up for your spot because, yes, even though the webinar is free, seats are still limited because that's how webinar hosting service platforms work these days. That's how they monetize their services, yada, yada, yada. So anyway, sign up for your spot by visiting makersplaybook.com/Instagram-photography. I will also put a link in the show notes so you can just wipe the mud off your hands right now, hit pause, click into the show notes on whatever podcast app you're listening to, come on over to makersplaybook.com/Instagram-photography and pop your name and email address into the form. Choose which day you want to join. There are examples listed on the form of a number of different time zone conversions to help with that piece of it. And yes, there are times available for all of my Southern Hemisphere friends that are not 3 a.m. I got you. Don't worry. And we can finally see each other face to face in at least virtual real life on January 26th and 27th. If you've only just found the podcast recently, this webinar is something I typically only host 2 times a year because frankly, it's a lot. It takes a lot of energy because I pack it full of a lot of information. Plus getting all the technology to work out and line up and make sure people have access. It's just... Anyway, it's a lot and I gotta get back to it all. So, a big thanks to Amico for sponsoring the Maker's Playbook podcast and helping to make this episode possible.
Hi, I'm Kara, content creator and Facebook wrangler for Amico Brand, bringing you ideas and support for your creative adventures every day. This week's episode is brought to you by Amico Brent. Find your favorite Amico glaze at your local distributor. Happy glazing!
Additionally, audio post-production of this podcast is made possible by help from Christy Codovan, with promotional material assistance from Queenie Malachi. The Maker's Playbook podcast is recorded on the original homelands of the Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee people, where the people of Wisconsin's sovereign, Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. Until next week, my friends, go get back to making your dreams a reality, because together, we've got this.